Now that we have some understanding of Docker machine, let's take a look at the Docker Compose. So the use case number 8 actually has something called Docker Compose MySQL. It basically consists of a Java project and then Ubuntu JDK 8 image. This is a very basic image of Ubuntu with JDK 8. So what we are going to do as a part of this exercise is to go back to PowerShell. Remember to run it as an administrator. So if you've not run it as an administrator, it's going to give you issues. So run it as an administrator. As you can see, it says administrator Windows PowerShell. So what I recommend doing is go into the use case number 8, and we'll go over this once again. For sake of brevity, I'm just taking you to get this started as soon as possible. So what we're going to do is we're just going to say Docker machine ls. Make sure that the Docker daemon is running. And if you do Docker machine ls, both of the containers are running right now. So what we're going to do is we are going to install a Java container and also a MySQL container as we initially stated in the introduction. I recommend going back to that presentation if you have questions. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to just say Docker machine eval hyper-v-vm-1. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm basically going to start up Docker machine. So let me go back to this scripts.txt and then env. Sorry. So as you can see, you'd have to use one of the machines as an active machine. So I'm just going to copy this, make sure that that is the active machine. So if I go back to Docker machine ls, it's going to specify that the machine is active. So whatever I run inside this is going to be confined to that machine. So as you can see, we just have an nginx container. So what I recommend doing is first to build this image, the image of Ubuntu JDK 8. So that's I'm going to use the basic Docker commands to build it. So and then I'm just going to go into that directory right now. As you can see, there's a Docker file, and then I'm just going to say docker build -t, and I'm going to use the same name which I've used in the Docker file here, which is pictolearn ubuntu jdk, which is actually pulled from my directory. So what I'm going to do is docker build -t. I'm just going to name the same thing, ubuntu -jdk 8, and then build it. And then I'm just going to say dot. So this is going to build Ubuntu. So the image has been created. I did a tag and also push into the repository. So if I go to dockerhub.com, I basically was able to push it into ubuntu-jdk 8. So I'm hoping that you can use the same image, or you will need to change this image based on your repository account. Now that said, I'm going to go back to Visual Studio Code. And if you look at this, we have this project, so we are done with it. So I'm going to just collapse it. So if you look at this, there are two sections. One is a Java project called Docker MySQL connector. The other one is a Docker Compose.yaml. Now Docker Compose is used to create microservices or run services inside of Docker machines or hosts or existing hosts. It provides an easy to read format. If you don't know YAML, I highly recommend looking up YAML. YAML is spelled as YAML, and it's a human readable markup language. So recommend reading that. If you go in here, you will see what it is. So that said, this Docker Compose file is in YAML. First, we declare the version of Docker Compose we are going to use. So in this case, 3.1 is the latest. The second one, what we're going to do is we're going to, as I showed in the first lecture, we're going to create two services. One which is going to be a MySQL service, and the other one is going to be a web service. I call it a web service because it's a standalone Java project. So basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open Eclipse and then say import, and then existing Maven projects. Make sure you click on existing Maven projects here, and then click on next, go to browse, or you can just paste in the path to the project, and then you click on browse, and then you click on finish. For those of you who know Maven, I'm just going to go over the pom.xml file. So the pom.xml is very straightforward. It basically uses one dependency, which is the MySQL connector, and everything else remains the same. There's also an assembly plugin to run the jar file as an executable. Now, I highly recommend becoming aware of this. The next thing in the Docker file is basically, we basically say I want to get the Ubuntu/JDK8 image. If you're using your own image, I highly recommend that you have to change this. This is a very important step, but I'm going to keep this up to date. The maintainer, as you know, is nothing but the author. And then what I'm doing here is exactly the same as what we did in the previous use cases. I'm just moving this project as is and then running Maven assembly. So the Ubuntu JDK8 also has the Maven plugin installed. So as you can see, it's just going to execute this Java file, which is called the MySQL connection. All this Java file does is it is going to sleep for 10 seconds and it's going to try to see if it can connect to the MySQL database. So that's basically what we do here. Now going back to the Docker Compose file, as you can see, we just name our microservice. It's called, the first microservice is called database. The next one is called web. So the web is nothing but the standalone application. We create, we use the Docker file, which is there inside of Docker MySQL connector. So if you want to see it, it's inside the Docker MySQL connector. So we use that and then give it a host name of web. I will cover this later. The TTY is the same as the TTY we use when we use the Docker build command. We use a -t and it's the same as that. The depends on basically says that I want to start up this service after this service has been started up. So imagine a use case where the standalone application starts up before the database is actually up. So we want to be able to avoid that. So in order to do that, we basically give depends on, and then we also link it to the database. So this is basically going to create a link between here and here, and I will get to it in a little bit. This is a very important statement. The environment specifies the environment variables. So this Docker Compose file is documented very well. Now let's take a look at links. So links basically is, so if you look at the MySQL connection, if you see here, I'm basically specifying db:3306. Now this db is basically nothing but the links which you create. Okay, and the 3306 is the port which you expose. Now remember, 3306 is a port. So this is as good as the expose command in the Docker file. And the host name is MySQL, and then we give it the environment variables, the username and password. So just to take you back to that picture, we're going to go back to that picture which is the use case picture, which is going to give you a clear description. As you can see, we created two Docker machines with two different IP addresses. These are dummy IP addresses. One has a microservice running, which is called MySQL, and another is a Java container, a standalone Java program called web. This is called DB in our Docker Compose file, and this is called web in our Docker Compose file. So the Java is basically the web and MySQL is basically the database, and the same is the case in this case as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a Java program run in this section, which is going to connect to the MySQL, and the same thing is going to happen here as well. So just to quickly review the Docker Compose file once again. So going back to the Docker Compose file, just to recap, this is the version, this is the latest version. We specify two microservices running on each machine. One is called the DB and the other one is called the web, and the web is a standalone. The image is name of the image, in this case the image which has to be downloaded from the DockerHub repository. This is the same as the expose command, so that we can have anything from the host machine access this, and also this particular microcontainer access this. And then since we are running both of them under the same container, this is going to use port 3306, which is the highlighted one in this case. This is for any host to connect to the container inside. And the host name is nothing but the host name. I mean, it's very self-explicable. The TTY is, in this case, we specify TTY, which says run it in TTY mode. The depends on basically says once this is started, only then this needs to be started. And then links basically specifies the name of the service this can connect to. So the place where we are using it is we're saying db:3306 instead of localhost:3306, and Docker will automatically try to resolve this because this is the host name. All right, so let's go through this lecture and then see how to work on it. I'm just going to go through the Docker file quickly. As you said, this is a basic Docker file, self-explicable, and it's going to run that MySQL connection. And as you can see, this has got a while loop. Unless and until it connects, it's not going to exit out of the while loop. So let's go see how that works.